And meditation, those things, you're not talking, you're not presenting, you're just kind of listening. You may be listening to yourself and your thoughts. You may be listening to music or a guide.
Good afternoon, good day, good evening. I don't know what time you're listening or where you're listening from. It's your boy, your host, NaRon Tillman, and you are with me for another episode of Walk in Victory. Speaking of victory, walk.
Warning! This is a public service announcement. The Walk in Victory podcast is where we have conversations purposed to evolve lives. You may not want to evolve. Then tune into another bleeping podcast. Everyone else, enjoy the show. And here's our host.
Good afternoon, good day, good evening. I don't know what time you're listening or where you're listening from. It's your boy, your host, NaRon Tillman, and you are with me for another episode of Walk in Victory. Speaking of victory walks, we've all had to, those of us who have gotten to the other side and would be honest, had to pivot after COVID. I was doing yoga and mindfulness in schools, and we were really taking off and skyrocketing. And then yoga hit. Yoga didn't hit. COVID hit. And once COVID hit and came back, everything slowed down. First of all, the New York City moved from the curriculum, which required more mindfulness and stuff like that. And they changed their core curriculums. And so I had to pivot as a company. I had to pivot as a brand. And a lot of people was going through that. And you hear over and over people who have built something pre-COVID, post-COVID, they had to find themselves building again. But the other thing that wound up happening is that there was plenty of opportunity for online space. During COVID, I took a class in podcasting. I already had a podcast, but I really didn't understand the systems of podcasts, whereas that allowed me to take a challenge, allowed me to go into a class, allowed me to become better at the craft of podcasting, and allowed me to see podcasting through a different lens. And now we have a production company, which we produce other podcasts, and we're going into podcast coaching, and we're doing some other stuff. But everything that we're doing is connected to what we were doing as a brand through the Urban Yogis, which is mindfulness. And still now I was able to develop a mindset to really bring everything that I had together under an umbrella, juxtaposed, segmenting everything, where I've been preaching since I was 25. And sometimes you want to get away from that stuff, right? But now I understand that there's a blend through the advent of neuroscience and spirituality. There's a unique blend of entrepreneurship, spirituality, and best mindful practices of movement. And it's like everything came into our wheelhouse. So we went from a place where everyone was busy and you're trying to find your footing and niche down into one thing, to now where people are really more cognizant and aware that there's more to life than making money. There's more to life than just being busy. And really, people want to find balance, even if they're atheists. They want to find balance between the conscious and the subconscious mind, or traumas and past. And we all experience, as a world, trauma at the same time. So it's not like something happened at your neighbor's house, you weren't affected. We all were affected. We all lost a sense of touch. But here's the funny thing that happened during that time, not to harp on the COVID moment. When we came out of it, the world as we knew it changed. There was a hard reset. And I'm going to tell you guys, it's not coming back. The world as we known it before had a hard reset, hard stop. And fast forward ahead, we are now living in a new era, and the AI era. And if you look at historically, anytime you had major transformations, whether it's in currency or technology, it always came on the heels of calamity, currency change, calamity, technology change, calamity. So this pattern. I don't know. I'm not saying I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but what I will say is that throughout history, and you can go as far back as you want to, throughout history, there's always a major event that's unexplainable, And following that major event, there's a calculated push to make some type of transformation in society. And we're living in the midst of that transformation. And those of you who are listening, we're living in history. We're living in history. I told you, as we bring in, I've been preaching since I was 24, I'll be 25 years old. I'll be 25 years old. I'll be 50 years old. And oftentimes when I look at the Bible, we talk about interpretation and systems of interpretation. And the first thing that we have to look at is historical interpretation. How were the people in their time? So it's easy for us to say, oh, if I was there, I would have did this different. I would have did that differently. We can't really say that because we weren't living in that time. The culture was different. The settings were different. Everything was different. And it's the same thing where we are right now. Someone is going to look back to where we are 50 years from now and interpret how we are interpreting in this time. And they're going to look at this historical moment and say, if I was there, I would have been a billionaire because I would have took advantage of this. And I would have, but hindsight is 2020. Are you willing to roll the dice? Are you willing to try something different? And that's what Walk in Victory is about, having conversations to push the limit, push you to the place of imagination in a place where you can see yourself past where you are. Hirsch, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, NaRon. Thank you. That was very interesting to hear that take coming in. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, well, tell our audience a little bit about yourself as much as you're willing to share, and we're going to jump and dive right into it.
Yeah, so I came to do what I do, which is to be a holistic brand therapist. And I use those words very intentionally because I think that the personal brand is really all about who you are in total. It's your whole personality, but framed in a way that helps you climb that next mountain because your audience wants to hear from you a certain way. They don't want to be confused. They want to know what you bring to the party, but they also want to know who are you? It's like you ask, who am I? I'm a creative person. I did stand-up comedy. I wrote a few little movies. I was a publicist. I went through this thing of doing all these different things enough that I could do them professionally, but not feeling like that was my identity. So if I walked into a room and somebody said, what do you do? And it was a room full of movie producers, I would say I was a screenwriter because that's what was relevant. If I walked into a room full of bookers from comedy clubs, I would say I'm a comedian. And I needed to figure out, how can I just be one person? How can I just be Hirsch and just be me? And that is a harder thing, I think, than a lot of us realize because it isn't just about marketing strategy. It isn't just about, oh, here's the tools to build a personal brand, or here's the prompt you put into AI to get your personal brand out. It really is about looking at your whole life. And it's funny, you made that slip up of saying you started preaching when you're 24 and you're going to be 25. I was like, wow, it's a short story, but it's quite a transformation so far, all the things you've accomplished. And I'm like, but seriously, when you get to be in your 40s, 50, and you have a bunch of stuff that you have gone through and either learned or accomplished or both, pain, joy, all that stuff, that is who you are now. So the person you were at 24 is not even the person you are at 25 or 27 or 47 or 50. So it's an ever evolving thing. And I like to feel like maybe this journey that I went on is part of the reason I am of service now to help people with their personal brand, because I went through the same stuff. Did I work in this field? Yeah, I learned principles of branding and creative direction and advertising and marketing and all that good stuff. But what I really bring to it now is who I am now. And I think that's that lesson that I've learned.
It's interesting that as you go through the fact that you're embracing everything that you were. Like I went through the same thing, like musician, preaching, doing all of these things, not playing an instrument, but directing and writing. And you go in the room like, this guy does everything, right?
Yes.
And, but then when you get older, you realize that all of those skill sets are handy. If I wasn't performing at an early age, I don't have stage fright. I don't go and I'm not afraid to
Yeah.
speak in front of people. It was more difficult speaking into open space in front of a microphone when you're used to having some type of energy exchange and interaction. So these are the things that we didn't have to go through because we've already been involved in being in front of people and in public speaking and all of the things that some people have to overcome. But one of the things that we both probably have synergistically is that most of our work early on dealt with external, where we were engaging people, you being a comedian, in punchlines, right? And
Yeah.
engaging people in laughter, or engaging people in contemplation, or writing a movie. And all of those things were looking from within, but without.
Yes.
Now we're both looking from without within. How has that transformation been for you? And what are some of the takeaways that you've learned as you've transformed?
I think you hit the nail on the head with it was external at first. And I think what I thought I was looking for was also external. Right? Like
Mm.
my writing was clever, and even funny, but in some ways superficial. When I was doing the stand up, I was doing characters. And I thought the way I looked at it was the characters have depth, which they did, but they weren't me. They were a mask. They were a substitute for me that protected me. But yet I wanted the external success. So I think I was just very limited in what I was asking of myself and what I was asking in return. And it wasn't, like I say, sometimes a little success can do a lot of damage. Like you're doing well enough to keep doing it, but that isn't necessarily what you're supposed to be doing. And I think the real transformation was when I started meditating and I did peak performance course and I did some quantum consciousness with a coach. And I think legitimizing that process for myself was a major transformation because on the other side of that, I started to be able to give more because once I was looking inside myself and trying to figure out what do I need to fix? What's the hang up here? What are my stories I'm telling myself? What are my delusions? What are my foibles? Then I could offer other people insight in a way that was much more substantial and not superficial. And so I feel it really deepened me and that made the journey very different for me and much more comfortable, interestingly. No less
No,
complicated, really, but much more comfortable.
it's funny that you would say that because that kind of sums up what I went through, starting to preach at such an early age, thinking that I know it all and I'm going to just save the world. And then going through being tasting a level of success, whatever that looks like in ministry. But really, it was more of presentation and not cultivation because
Yeah.
everything was outward, whether it's the building or the feedback from the people, and you're like still trying to figure yourself out. And when you have those type of responsibilities and you really don't know, if it wasn't meditation and my yoga practice that helped me to really focus on internal. And I know that sounds weird coming from someone who's saying that a pastor at a church and all of that stuff like that, but really the religion has a way of not looking inwardly at
Yeah.
times. 'Cause-
That's really well
and
said, Aaron, because I think what happens with people like us who have the ability to be extroverted, because I don't know that you can put people in a box and say, oh, this person's an extrovert, this person's an introvert. I think we can be both. We can be ambiverts, as they
well,
call it. But I think if we look at our presentation of what we were doing, we were sincere in what we were doing. But yet some people might say, oh, that's fake, or that's not resonating, or that's not really moving me deeply. And we're like, but I mean it. I'm not trying to pretend that I care. But when you have the gift of being able to talk, sometimes you miss out on what the value is of being silent. And meditation, those things, you're not talking, you're not presenting, you're just kind of listening. You may be listening to yourself and your thoughts. You may be listening to music or a guide. You may be listening to the universe, but you're not getting up in front of people and talking. And I think when you have that ability, that skill, sometimes we overuse it like any instrument. And we, instead of listening to music, we're playing. We're constantly playing.
Yeah, I was listening to Stern and yeah, one of the older musicians on a Page. I think it was Lenny Page, I believe. But he said in music, and this is a great analogy that you use, says the every musician don't approach the fact that they're coming into a piece of music with nothing but space.
Mm.
And it is not filling that space up with a bunch of sound. It's allowing the space to still resonate and placing the sound strategically throughout the space, because the most valuable thing that we can do is listen
Yeah.
or have our rest, and that's powerful. And how was that for you? Having to always be on, right? Because once you're a comedian, you have to be on. You have to be observant. You have to be looking in a way that we can take something that's tragic and make it funny,
Yeah.
or in a way that we can. So how was that? And now you're teaching other people how to be silent. How do
Yeah.
you find a bridge
Yeah.
between the two?
And I'm not even, I guess you're right. Look, in a way, I am helping people be silent and listen to themselves, but I'm also helping them listen to the audience that they want to reach. That's an interesting switch, in that I learned from stand-up comedy, from not from just from being on stage. I learned from standing in the back of the room and reading the room. And when people would come up to me at a party or introduce me to somebody at a dinner and say, "Oh, tell me a joke," that's the worst thing the comedian can hear. Tell me a joke, because context is everything. If I walk into a comedy club and I know I'm on next, and I'm standing in the back of the room and I'm watching the other comedian perform, and I'm seeing how the audience is receiving them, that's my research right there of what I'm going to do when I get on stage. That's how I'm going to know what to do. So if I'm caught unaware and somebody's make me laugh, it doesn't seem to click. You wouldn't meet an accountant at a cocktail party and say, "Hey, do my taxes." They don't know anything about you. They don't know. They don't have any information. And it's, "Do my taxes. Show me your thing, your skill, your." So it's a different experience now, in that I'm still reading the room. We're always reading the room, but I feel like I can be more genuine in what I tell people, because there isn't really a difference between the me that's on a stage, let's say giving a keynote talk, even if it's funny, and the me doing a one-on-one interview or talking to you off camera and talking one-on-one. I'm the same person. So that's a huge relief, not to have to assume there is what I call your presenting persona and your work persona, let's say, or your personal persona. There are different levels. If you're going to get up and preach, you're going to project to the back of the church, you're going to project, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to be you. And I know for myself, what I experienced previously was that I had one person that I had to be on stage and another person that I was in life.
And when you start young doing something, that becomes an issue. And I think that your whole holistic brand therapy, because the brand, most people identify the brand with the persona.
Yeah.
And the brand, as I have a course that I taught called The Mindful Marketer, where marketing is both material and immaterial. The things that we have accomplished, or the things that people see when we walk in the room, right? So if I say, hey, I'm a pastor, right? So there's a level of expectation that comes with that, right?
Yeah.
When I walk in the room, they're like, oh, wow, the pastor got a drink. And yes, I do drink, right? But and I had to learn how to be free within who I am, because then you come across inauthentic, right?
Yes.
If I don't want to sit down and have a conversation with you and I'm criticizing you for doing something that I take pleasure in the privacy of my own home, because I can't be real with that. When you talk about a brand and being holistic or being responsible with the brand, because when I look at the word holistic, that's what I'm looking at. Responsible brand therapist, right? You want somebody to be responsible with their actions, responsible with their activities, because their brand depends on it. How was that for you as you started to develop that out and craft that out? And as you said earlier, um, you chose those words
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah. Thank you. So interestingly, what evolved was the comedy evolved first. So I was still doing comedy, but I found myself transitioning from doing like voices, characters, impressions, and all of that external stuff to just being me. And still, like I said, there's a difference between going up and doing stand-up comedy. All the stories aren't exactly true. It's not, there's still a level of performance, but I wasn't doing the characters anymore. I wasn't coming out as someone who wasn't me. And I learned that from a friend of mine, a comedian named Rich Aronovich, who does a lot of different voices, characters, act outs, all these things. But he said to me, don't, when you go on stage and you open with, let's say, a Cuban accent or some other accent or something, the audience will never trust you because they don't know who you really are.
Yeah.
Come out as yourself and be yourself and build that trust with the audience. And that changed my whole point of view. So that happened while I was still doing stand-up comedy, but I really leaned into who I was and what I felt. And that gave way to what I call selling the truth, which is the title of my book that's coming out, and it's on my website in big bold letters, Sell the Truth, because that's really all you have in the end, right? All the bells and whistles and all the stuff you try and all this other stuff, you really just have the truth about you and the ABCs of me, whatever it is. That's all I have. I learned that in comedy. And once I was doing that, as you mentioned when we started, COVID was, I was already, I was doing comedy, but I was also doing branding and creative for footwear brands. I had a business partner and we had an agency and we were doing that. And when COVID hit, we couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't perform on stage. You talked about having that exchange with people and you being used to that energy that you have when there's a live audience with stand up, and people tried everything, Zoom comedy, drive-in comedy, where people would be in their cars and honk instead of laugh. Oh my God, that was crazy. But it was like, I realized that I wanted to continue this selling the truth idea. And I started my podcast, The Truth Tastes Funny, because the idea is that the truth is weird sometimes. It is crazy sometimes. It takes a little bit of humor to help it go down, but we have to face it. We have to face it. It's not going back, like you said. We're not going back. We're not going back to what it was before. Even if we wanted to, we couldn't. And we're in a constant state of flux. I loved all of those things you said because they're so true. We're here now. And tomorrow we're going to be where we're going to be here in that experience. And we don't know what's going to happen between now and then. So if we can cling to these little things that we know are true about ourselves, to ourselves, It's not even opinions. It's like you stub your toe. It hurts or it doesn't. But that's pretty much the truth, right? That's the reality. No one can tell you, no, you're wrong, or no, it doesn't hurt, or no, you didn't stub your toe.
It's funny because pressing forward with that point that we're not going back, and the fact that you were able to use calamity to pivot, because now you had the opportunity to really stop. There was no gigs because there was still like that same pace and the sneakers and the this and that. You really wouldn't have had the chance to really tap into ways that you're doing right now. How did you? Was it kicking and screaming for you, or was it woosah?
It was kicking and screaming. It was, because I think if I look at it in the big picture, in the long term, the journey, I was kicking and screaming for 20 years to get here, because I kept thinking that the reward or the goal was the comedy or the external or whatever it was. And so at first during COVID, my instinct was to write a show, right? I was recording videos, I was recording funny videos and things, but that was more to keep my sanity keep from going crazy. I did a series on YouTube where I played a bunch of roles that a friend of mine had written this crazy script and was like, I saw all your videos, you could play all the roles. And we did it. We shot 6 or 7 episodes of this crazy YouTube series. But all of that stuff was me kicking and screaming to let go of those things. It's not that there was anything wrong with them. It's just, to get here, I had to really pivot away from the way I was doing stuff, the things I was doing, and the things I thought were going to make me happy.
Because going from a traditional, because I remember the place said we was going to be shut down for 2 weeks, and I looked at the congregation, I want to see you guys in 2 weeks. Well,
Yeah.
I haven't been back in the building since. Lost a lot of people, but now I know when I'm riding up and down the street and I'm looking at all of these empty commercial buildings, I don't want to have that again.
Yeah.
And what we were able to figure is we can reach a broader audience and not worry, because when you're worried about selling the tickets, filling the room, all those things, the app takes a back seat.
Yeah.
When you're standing up and there's 5 people in the room, you're like, where the
Oh,
fuck are
yeah.
people at?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the clarity, there's something that should be said also, which is one of the things that frustrated me was that I couldn't predict in any way what my income would be or what my work would yield. My business partner and I everything was word of mouth, and we were just picking up clients as we went through the same rooms. You're going in the room, it's like fishing, it's like bobbing for apples. You go in the room, you see who's there, you pick up a client or you don't, so you go in the next, but it's all the same community, which is very comforting. And that's why we stayed in those communities, because we were comfortable. There was nothing more I could do. I wasn't podcasting before. I wasn't meeting new people. I wasn't going into communities. I was just staying in the business I was in and just going around in a circle and hoping that it would work out okay. And that's very frustrating when you have a family, when you're building stuff. Yeah, it's frustrating. So I think that was a major inspiration in terms of, you talk about driving and looking at the empty commercial buildings. I didn't want to keep dipping into that same well and coming up empty and seeing the business is suffering. There's nothing else I can do. What can I do? So I wanted to create an environment where I could always do something different. I could always talk to different people, or I could always change up my act, so to speak. Could always change it up. I could always evolve it. I could always take control of it. And so I think that was a big part of it.
As a holistic brand therapist, when you look at that and if you're talking to, let's say, a comedian that's going through the similar thing and they're trying to feel their way through, what are some of the things that you, some of the principles or some of the things that you like to lean into to get a person to tap into who they really are, their true iamic selves?
Yeah. The first thing is to go through almost like a visualization and say, look, if
Mhm.
everything went perfectly, if everything went perfectly for the next 12 to 24 months, what would it look like? What would perfection look like? What would success really look like? And it sounds like an easy question, but I think a lot of us, yeah, it's not. I think a lot of us are like, if I get through today, then I will have knocked off this list of things that I got to do, and I'll have called the vet, and I'll have done this thing. So that's how most of us are able to. So when I talk to somebody, I would say, the what would it look like? Now, a comedian might say, I would have this many bookings, or I would have this much. And then you start to go a little deeper. Okay, so why is that? Why is that the best case scenario? What is that? How does that make you feel? Project yourself into that thing. Now you've done that. You got 10 bookings or whatever you got. What does that feel like? And it's interesting that it'll start to texturize, it'll start to change. And sometimes they would even say, I would have a better relationship with my wife, or I would reconnect with my sister, or I would do. It starts to become more personal as they get more comfortable. And then it's okay, what is stopping you? And that's why I call it therapy, because it is much deeper than how much money do you want to make in the next. I wrote an
Mhm.
article, how many times do I have to X you? Because people will say, "Oh, I can 10x your business, I can 3x your growth, I can X this amount." And it's sometimes it's not about multiplying this the same thing you're already doing. If that was actually what you wanted, that there's strategies to do, that's fine. If I said, "What does it look like in the next 12, 24 months?" They said, "Look, my life is perfect. It's just I'm stuck in this frame and I really want to be known in all these other countries. And so that way I can 10 times." We come up with brand strategies that will position your personal brand to reach the audience you want to reach. But, you got to ask those questions.
Historically, we see that a lot of mediums suffer from depression or deep contemplation. And I think that what you're doing is refreshing because you, in order to be funny, you have to think on a deep level, right?
Yeah.
You have to use the right words. And comedy is very competitive. I know that people don't like to compare one another and stuff like that, but when you're playing a small room and you think that you're just as funny as the guy that's playing the stadium, you're like, you can't be in any kind of business comparing yourself to everybody that where you are in order to be successful. You gotta shoot big. So how was that for you dealing with some rejections and dealing with walking away, and maybe feeling unappreciated, juxtaposed to where you are now and how you feel? And you're still using the same muscle, the contemplation and all of those other things that you have to do in order to be a great comedian. But now you're doing something that's that you can make people laugh in what you're doing, but it's also a little bit more altruistic.
Yeah. Yeah. The best thing about it is that it isn't about me. And
Mm.
I thought it, I thought it should be. Like when you say you look at, like, I would look at comedians and they're playing these stadiums. And I thought that's what I should be doing. And I was like, I know that they did a lot of work to get there. Very rarely did I see people playing these big arenas and stadiums. I had this thing in my head, the O2 arena. There's one in London, there's one in Australia. They're huge arenas. And I was like, I want to play the O2 in London because I had seen this comedian who had played it. And but at the same time, it wasn't happening exactly. And I realized, I think what I did earlier in my career, which was to help, I was working with direct filmmakers and visual effects artists, editors, composers, and I was doing PR for those people. And I realized, I thought at the time I didn't belong there. I belonged on the other side of the camera or the other side of the stage or on the stage. It just, it's just a relief to realize that it's not about me, that it's my client's mission or my client's success that truly makes me happy. And yeah, I love getting up on stage and I love doing speaking engagements and I love talking to audiences, but the audience size is totally not like that. That's a lot. That's a lot to put on yourself. Oh, I should be playing in front of 60,000 people. And I don't know when that switch flipped exactly, but I know that it had a lot to do with that inner exploration, because I think that just changed what the desired outcome was. I think that the idea of, what one of my good friends calls the fame bug. People have the fame bug. They want to be on stage and they want to do that. And it becomes the primary goal. And that's very self-involved. So if you're someone who has a family and you're someone who loves your family, you're someone who loves people really, that's not really the place for you, because that's a very solitary pursuit.
And if you're within that mindset, and listen to me very clearly, everyone, that's how people end up under Diddy's table, because they'll do anything.
That's a great phrase.
They'll do anything to get there. And if someone is saying, how bad do you want it? You're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I want it really bad." Like, this is what everybody's doing. You're like, this is what everybody's doing. I don't want it.
Yeah. To build on that, and is that really going to make you happy? And you know what I mean? Not being under the table, but getting to the next level, right? So let's say it works. You do your time under the table and then now you're at the table. But now what? You still are that person. You still did that or made that sacrifice, because now that's assuming that that you're that's assuming that this is all part of a willing kind of a plan, because it can apply to anything. I'm going to compromise X to get to Y, as opposed to I'm going to work my butt off to get to Y. That's understood. Ask any founder, ask any entrepreneur, solopreneur, coach, consultant, ask them if it was easy. Ask them if it was easy. No, of course it's not easy.
No.
Of course it's not easy. Ask them if there are shortcuts. Ask them if there's any good shortcuts. There aren't.
No, and there aren't, because I was just talking to a friend of mine the other day, and I love baseball. And we were talking about the steroid era, because there's a lot of people that played in that era that's not making it to the Hall of Fame. And I'm like, Roger Clemens was a Hall of Famer with or without steroids. A lot of those guys were Hall of Famers with or without steroids. The question is, if you could take a pill, a shot, to extend your career, to feed your family, and the only repercussion is public vitriol, would you do it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And got me playing to 35, I could play till I'm 45?
Yeah. Ask them at 45. Ask them at 45. They're the only ones who can answer that question.
They're the only one's question.
I can't
But
answer
when you
that
get
question because I chose not to take that pill. I chose that I did, and I even made the choice instinctively when I was younger not to do it. But I think I suffered for many years thinking that I had not maybe made the wrong choice. Maybe I should have taken that pill. Maybe I should have given up the whole idea of having a family or raising kids or maybe I should have done that. But I don't think in my case that I don't regret not taking that pill, so to speak.
And the people that take the pill oftentimes, as in Pete Rose, who was gambling, or
Right.
now 20 years later, they're saying, all I did was take the pill. Like, when are you gonna let it go? And some people won't let it go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some people,
And the fact is that we all make our bed. We make our bed, whatever it is. So a good example of making your bed is somebody like Paul Newman, who, as an actor reached pinnacle, whatever, but was never interested in being famous and signing autographs. At the time, that was the thing. There was no Cameo or whatever it was, but you walk down the street and you're Paul Newman and everybody wanted an autograph. And he didn't sign autographs, but from what I heard, he was a super nice person and a super grounded person. And he would talk to people and he would talk to you, but you don't want my autograph. It doesn't mean anything. It's not, I don't want to do it. And I don't want to be judged that way. And I don't want to, and I think it's just a decision but he realized I made a decision to be in the public eye. If I wanted to succeed at what I was doing, if I wanted to be a really fine actor and I wanted to take care of my family, I had to take that pill, but I didn't have to change who I was.
this is why you're the holistic brand therapist,
Yeah.
because you're able to see things through. Talk about your book, and then recommend a book that if you was to, it could be fiction and nonfiction. But first, talk about your book and when can we expect the release date and all of that.
Yeah, thank you. So the book is called Selling the Truth, a semoir. I call it a semi-memoir, a semoir with insights for life and business. And I combine business and life. And it's a semi-memoir because it talks a little bit about what my journey was, but it also is really there for the reader who is looking to live that selling the truth existence. They want to sell the truth. They maybe don't know how, and they can learn from some of the mistakes I've made, some of the calls things that have been right, things that I've just learned from getting it wrong, with humor and with warmth and empathy, and not really with judgment of anybody else or myself. And that's a thing that it took me a long time to learn, because I was a very harsh critic of myself. I was a very unforgiving judge of myself. And I think that can cost us a lot of time. If you want to learn about truth in advertising and how to conduct yourself in business for the greatest results that are truly going to make you happy, not just make money, although money is great. That was another lesson I had to learn. I grew up thinking that money was corrupt and money was for people who weren't honest and all that stuff. And if you want to get firsthand insight into how to sell the truth to the audience you want to sell it to, it's a really fun book. And it's going to be out at select bookstores. It will not be mass marketed in that way, because I really believe that you have to find your audience and they have to find you in a way that's truthful and sincere, but also innovative and fresh. And so I'm going to be going to indie booksellers all over the country. And I think it's going to be a fun campaign, but look for it this summer. If you go to hirschrepun.com, REPHUN, or yesbrandbuilders.com, you can sign up for the pre-order there.
There you have it, everybody. I told you we sit you at the feet of the masters. We have conversations that help you evolve your life, and that's what it's all about. We don't ask you for Cash App, Venmos, or any of those things, but what we do ask is that you hit and subscribe, your likes, your subscriptions. Help these conversations get into the ears of people that need it. Somebody needs to hear Hirsch's story and this conversation. So hit and subscribe. Also, if you're listening on a platform where you can leave a review, whether it's PodPage or not PodPage, or Apple, Spotify, and it's one of those other things. There's only three places that you can leave a review. Do leave 5-star review. It helps us to get higher in the algorithm. And finally, don't walk with your head down. Don't walk making excuses. Don't walk being as if you're inadequate or not your true authentic self. Those who are part of the Walk in Victory family, you know how we walk. We walk in victory. Hershey now is a part of the family. Enjoy the rest of your day. Peace.